What's really good, fam? So, I know the market is looking pretty miserable, and although I personally don't see an end to the tunnel coming for at least a year, environments like these are kind of what I love the most because I get to do what I like to do best: bargain shopping. Ultimately, recessions and bear markets are just fire sales for people with liquidity, so the market is what we're going to be talking about today. You're watching Sekidir, and today we're talking about a sector that's pretty down, but has a very bright future going forward, and that's automobile sensor and camera makers. Now, before we continue, we'd just like to remind you that this channel is meant for educational purposes only and isn't meant to replace the legal or financial advice from a paid professional. When it comes to investments, it's always healthy to take everything with a fair bit of skepticism regardless of the source, and that includes us. So for that reason, nothing we say here should be taken as a basis for investment, and you'll have to do your own work and thinking before deciding whether taking up a position on any stock mentioned here is in your best interest. Want to know how? Well, if you scroll down a tiny bit and hit the like and subscribe buttons, we'll do our best to help you figure out how to figure out this game for yourself. And with that being said, let's get to it. Alright, before I get into the companies, I'd just like to introduce the sector and talk about why I see it as a good place for bargain hunting over the next few years, starting with what is this sector and what does it do? Well, basically, as disruption, automation, and technological innovation continues to shift the way that automakers approach their vehicles, and as autonomous driving and autonomous parking become standardized in the industry for both commercial and passenger vehicles, we're seeing an ever-growing need for automotive cameras and sensors that help the cars read their surroundings and adjust their movement accordingly. For that reason, major optics solutions developers across the country are shifting their manufacturing to meet this new demand and hopefully generate a strong position in what is a very new and as of yet unsorted industry. As a country that has not only done very well in developing automobiles, auto parts, and optics hard and software, it's no surprise that a few companies here have made their presence felt in the market early and are making headways into it. So let's talk about a couple of them, shall we? Let's start at the top, since their company is already established in other markets and their scale and reach is so much greater than their competition. Who I'm talking about, of course, is LG Innotek. Now, if you've never heard of the company, LG Innotek is a business-to-business corporation that has built a reputation supplying a wide variety of parts for automakers, electronics makers, and electronics part makers. That is to say, they make parts for electronics, as well as parts for companies that make parts for electronics. Specifically, their firm addresses four key sectors: optic solutions, substrate and materials, automotive components, and electronic components. The first one, Optic Solutions, is a big money maker for them these days, as they were chosen by Apple to provide the front-facing cameras for the iPhone 14 in a 50-50 split with the Japanese firm Sharp. This is in addition to being a key provider of rear-facing cameras for the same phone, as well as key parts like OIS systems for image stabilization, camera circuit boards, and actuators. Whoa, I said that weird. Camera circuit boards and actuators. One important thing to note on this front is that LG Innotek used to provide the latter parts to LG, who would then assemble those parts and ship them to Apple, but they've recently internalized those parts such that they're able to do all of it themselves before shipping out, which is likely to improve their overall profitability going forward. Really though, we're not here to talk about their phone camera business, since that market is really competitive, it's been around for a really long time, and everybody's in it. Rather, I want to talk about their recent move into automotive optics, which naturally builds off of their work on phone camera tech. As for news on that front, they've recently reached an agreement with Tesla Motors to supply trillions of won worth of camera module parts to the automaker. This comes after the company made a move last year to shift their camera module division from the electronics parts to the optical solutions division, sending the message that their abilities in the optical solutions sector are diverse and a priority for growth. Thus, their efforts and the above-mentioned partnerships with massive global companies over the past year has put the company in a position for both top and bottom line growth over the first 2 quarters of this year when compared to last. This continues a trend that began in 2020 and is reflected in their massive increase in assets when compared to Q2 last year. One thing to note, however, is that their cash flows turned negative in the second quarter in spite of a huge bump in CFO due to significant funds invested over that time. More important to me as an investor though is sales growth across their 4 sectors, and this chart provided in their Q2 financial report clearly reflects sales growth in all sectors for 2 years running. Another thing to pay attention to is that the back half of 2021 saw a spike in sales, so compared to the prior half, we're seeing a pullback in their revenues. But if you really believe in their ability to solidify their foothold in the automotive industry, then the short-term adjustment from last year's high base should be of little consequence in the long term. Even still, with a PE of roughly 6 after multiple adjustments over the course of the past 6 months that brought it down 17.7% from its high at 41만 1,500원 in last March, the stock still may be undervalued even after a year of growth that saw its market cap balloon up 50%. Still, as a global competitor in a rapidly growing field, there is a lot of room to grow, particularly given that we're in a pretty deep trough in the market right now. Personally, I've decided to wait a bit and kept the sector on my radar since around January, but have yet to put any money into it. I just don't believe that I have enough knowledge in the sector to commit any capital to it in the moment. That might not be the case for you, and if so, LG Innotek is a good place to start when looking at Korean companies in this sector, which is the automotive camera sector, obviously. Alright, we're already at 6 minutes, which means it took way longer than I expected it to, so let's just get into one more other firm, shall we? Alright, who I want to talk about next is Patron, or Partron in English, that's how it's spelled. They're definitely a smaller company, but they are still connected to some major players, having spun off from Samsung Electromechanics in 2003. That made them at the time one of the largest component part companies in the world and allowed them to establish a strong presence in the business-to-business electronic sector and eventually launch business-to-customer items like smartbands, wireless chargers, and headsets. Ultimately, however, their bread and butter is based on electronics parts such as RF modules, isolators, fingerprint sensors, those things that make your phone vibrate, and most importantly, what we're talking about today, camera modules and sensors. Actually, I guess it would be beneficial to talk about the other stuff that they've done first, such as being one of the key parts providers for Samsung Electronics phones. Thus, with every new generation of phones, we can expect to see new waves of profitability for the company. This is why they were able to grow their OP by 87.7% last year, as they were able to fill much of the shortage in smartphone camera modules that arose last year. This was also driven by the growth in automation, which naturally leads to increased demand in camera modules and sensors, as automated robots need to be able to read their environment quickly and accurately. Now, back last year when everything was all about tech and innovation, you may remember Hyundai Mobis revealing new tech, which was geared towards detecting driver drowsiness as a future tech safety measure for the group's vehicles. Well, Patron is one of the main providers of camera sensors, and late last year they invested in a company that specializes in just that. It's called IRTech, I think it's in America. Anyways, at the end of last year, Patron also began supplying camera modules to the Hyundai Motor Company for use in their Genesis lines GV90 and GV60 vehicles. They also have plans to expand their partnership with Hyundai Mobis starting this year. I haven't really gotten any news on that, I'll let you know if I do. Ultimately, this is all to say that Patron is a company, I'm changing the way I'm pronouncing it, just live with it. Patron is one of those companies that may not be on anyone's radar really, unless you're in the industry, but does have a significant number of really big players that they have partnerships with and that they're already doing business with. Now, this video is really only meant to be an introduction to the sector, so we're going to end it here. But image sensor tech is a new, large, and growing market that definitely deserves consideration for anybody looking to get in early on a new burgeoning market. I also don't want to get it twisted. Although the stocks that we talked about are big players in our market at the moment, they're seeing tough competition from China, and we're also seeing a number of firms like SK Hynix and Samsung Electronics get into the fray. It would be some pure Saki-kun shit for me to tell you that I know how it's going to shake out, so definitely do more research into the sector and learn more about the sector and the companies in it before making any moves with your money. Alright, that's it from me. I hope this was helpful. I'll be back with something a little bit different soon. If you do want me to keep talking about stocks, let me know. I hope you're doing well. Take it easy, fam. Peace.